Hey everyone, in this video we want to approach the idea of gender in terms of Latin, right? So we want to start asking ourselves, what is gender? It's how we identify ourselves. That's the way I want you to think about it when we go through Latin class. There's a lot of different ways you can take this question, right? It's pretty heated debate, and we don't want to get into that necessarily. But when most of us hear the idea of gender, hear the term gender, we're usually thinking male or female. It's sort of along those lines, but it's actually more complicated than that. It's really about how we identify ourselves, and that's the key element I want you to think about, the identification aspect. So does English use gender? It's a good question. The answer is sort of, right? We do, but not really in the way that you might think we do. So the only real way that we use gender is with our pronouns, right? We have specific gendered pronouns of he, she, and it. And you'll notice that that's only in the singular version. In the plural, we have they, and there's no way to tell the gender when you say they, the third person plural. It just doesn't exist. So there are certain times where we'll use gender in English, just not a lot. This is really the only time that we really do it. How about Latin, right? Does Latin use gender? Absolutely. So this is the whole point of this video, is letting you understand what Latin gender is all about. It's a key part of the language. Latin has three genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. So the thing we want to think about in terms of these genders is we have to break our own gender stereotypes. So make sure that you don't bring them to Latin class. Gender is a cultural idea. The way we view gender and what's masculine and what's feminine is not the same way that the Romans did. So if you come to class with your own kind of stereotypes or preconceived notions of what gender is, you're going to struggle. And so we want to break these gender stereotypes. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, gender stereotypes are everywhere, right? There's these oddly sort of pointlessly gendered products, right? The most famous one I can think of in my lifetime is Dr. Pepper 10. Good product, Dr. Pepper, but they came out with a different version that was supposed to be manly, right? And you can see the colors. It's red, it's gunmetal, right? This is supposed to be a manly low-calorie drink, right? And you can see these commercials. They still exist on YouTube. Feel free to go check them out. But their tagline was, "It's not for women," right? They just came out and said it. This is a man's product. Not the greatest idea. I'm not sure if they're even making Dr. Pepper 10 anymore. I know it offended a lot of people, but it's kind of an odd thing to make it a gendered product, right? In general, when you're selling a product, you want everyone to buy it. So why would you cut your market in half? Kind of an odd choice. Then you can find things like man-sized Kleenex. Again, not sure what that is, right? Maybe for man-sized boogers or a man-sized nose, right? It seems like an odd thing. Why would you gender Kleenex? But notice how it's that gunmetal color, right? That's the gunmetal and red, rather, are really what they're going for these stereotypes. And then in the bottom left, I showed you, I remember seeing these in the store. Bic, right? Made pens for her. I have no idea what that means. What is a lady's pen, right? A pen for her. It's kind of an odd thing to do, but notice the colors, right? Softer colors, pink, purple. They thought this would, appeal to girls and women and make them money. Hopefully it did. I have no idea. It just seems like an odd thing to designate, that there's a gender for a pen, right? Kind of odd, but these stereotypes are everywhere. You see them all over the place. Usually when it involves men or boys, it's blue or red. When it involves women or girls, you see pink. These are the old stereotypes, right? So just make sure that you're breaking these, because if not, you're going to be confused by Latin gender. And that really is the challenge, right? The challenge is to make sure that you understand that, we do not see the world the way the Romans did. I mean, that's totally fine. It's not about us, right? So make sure that you're coming to Latin class ready to go and not bringing these gender stereotypes, or like I said, you are going to be confused. So how does gender work in Latin? Well, like I said before, you have three genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. So the nouns that are referring to males, or sort of being manly, manly things, if you want to think of it that way, are masculine in Latin. And some of them make perfect sense. Boy, man, the names, Cornelius and Marcus, those kind of make sense for being masculine. The feminine nouns are ones referring to females. Words like girl, woman, Cornelia, Flavia, names, right? These are feminine, makes sense. And then we have this third gender called neuter, which is a little bit tricky for us to understand, because we don't really designate things like this, at least not the way the Romans do. So inanimate objects tend to be, neuter, neutral. And it's words like building, response, price, racetrack. These are not, associated with being male or female, or you can think of it as masculine or feminine. But that doesn't mean it works all the time. And this is the real idea. It's cultural, right? Grammatical gender, which is what we call this, right? There's sort of an idea of sort of biological gender, I guess is one way you could think about it, or natural gender. Sometimes people call it saying, boy equals masculine and girl equals feminine. We're not really talking about that here. We sort of are in the slide I showed you previously, but we're really talking about grammatical gender, right? Which is something different. So for instance, if I said to you, what gender is a boat, right? I don't know. What are you supposed to answer here? Well, the idea is weird because in Latin, it does have a gender, right? A boat can be a feminine word. It's like, well, that's kind of weird. But then if you think about it, even in our culture, if you watch kind of old time movies where people are setting sail on a boat and they're like, wow, well, bless this voyage or whatever. They say, she's a great boat, right? Sometimes you hear people say like, oh, my car, she's a beauty. It's like, why are you saying she? That's so odd, right? But they do it, right? So in Latin, you have these gendered terms too that might not make sense to you, right? Why is a tree feminine? I don't know. It is, right? Arbor is a feminine word. So you have a feminine tree, but the branch on that tree is masculine. Seems a little weird, right? If you keep going, you have the word house is feminine, a villa, right? But you could also say domus, which is not. It depends on which word you're using. A building, right? For whatever reason, a house is feminine and a building is neuter. And it gets you thinking, like, what is actually happening here? It's cultural, again. So if you're thinking about why the Romans viewed it this way, that might help you understand what's happening. Right? So in terms of a house, the house really was mom's domain in a lot of ways, right? Even in sort of American culture, for a long time, that was the case. If you think of your family, mom ran the house. So it's a feminine word. That's kind of what's going on here. You need to break out of your own culture and think of it through the lens of the Romans. Otherwise, you're going to be really, really confused about why certain words have certain genders, right? It'll just be confusing for you. So how are we going to figure this out? Well, there's kind of three keys to it. Practice, repetition, basically the same thing as practice, and memorization, right? You got to just memorize it as best you can and practice, practice, practice. The more you repeat it, the more you read, the more you work through Latin, the better off you're going to be. You will get stuck if you're not reading a ton of Latin. It's hard to figure out, like, what are these words and how am I supposed to know the gender? But the more you do it, you are going to memorize it just through that practice and repetition, and certain words are going to click to you and you're going to say to yourself, yeah, I understand what the gender is. Another good thing is that in basically any, Latin to English dictionary that you pick up, they're going to list the gender for you, right? So for nouns, we always list the gender. So if you look up the word house, villa, you're going to see an F dot, which stands for feminine. If you look up puer, boy, you're going to see M dot for masculine. And if you were to look up the word for building, you'd see edificium with an N dot, meaning neuter. So when you're looking in the dictionary, it's actually easy to figure out the gender. And in vocab lists, we always tend to put the gender there with nouns. So that'll help. But it's really important to get at this idea because it'll help you understand why, when you're reading stories, no matter what textbook or whatever Latin you're looking at, why is it a puella laeta, right? The girl is happy, puella laeta est, but it's ramus laetus est, right? The branch is happy, not that you'd say that. But if you were to say, oh, wow, that's a happy branch, why is it laetus instead of laeta, right? The endings on the noun and the adjective, we call this noun-adjective agreement. It has to do with gender, right? So when you match an adjective to a noun, you have to match the gender. So it's really important. You wouldn't say puella est laetus, right? People would probably understand what you're saying, but it would sound kind of silly, right? I always tell my classes, we don't really do it with gender, but we do it with number is another way that adjectives match nouns. You wouldn't say, oh, I see 3 tree over there. It's like, wait, what? 3 tree? No, you see 1 tree, right? It just sounds wrong. So the more you practice it, the better off you're going to be. And this is really about reading. And as you read and practice, you're going to memorize this as you go. Another thing that'll help you is thinking about the declensions, right, for nouns. So all nouns belong to one declension, and in general, they follow these rules. It's not fail-safe, but it's pretty close, right? So first declension tends to be feminine nouns. There are some masculine ones in there, but in general, they're feminine, so that'll kind of help. If you know that your word ends in an A, it's probably feminine. The second declension is usually masculine. There's also neuter there too, but a lot of them are masculine. So words that end in US, right, are masculine. On the neuter column of second, you'd see UM is a neuter ending. So whenever you see UM, you know that you're looking at a neuter noun if it's in the nominative singular. The third declension is a mix of everything. It's feminine, masculine, and neuter. Fourth and fifth, they do kind of mix, but in general, fourth tends to be masculine and fifth tends to be feminine. Again, these aren't hard set rules. They're just sort of in general to try to help you figure out what you're looking at. But again, the more you look at it, the better off you're going to be. And it's all about practice. So when you come to Latin class and you're thinking about gender, you can't have judgments, right? We're not judging the Romans. You can if you want, but it's not not our culture, right? It's not really our place to put assumptions or judgments on them. Our place is just to read the language and understand what they were thinking. You have to put yourself into their shoes with an open mind, and you have to have some cultural acceptance, right? You might not agree with it, and that's totally fine, but you need to learn the lesson that, the way the Romans view the world, you might not agree, but that's how they view the world. So when we learn their language and kind of respect the language that they spoke, you need to have that acceptance. And otherwise, you're just going to be really, really confused, right? Trying to figure out the gender. It's not going to match your preconceived notions. Again, I know I've said that before, but it's the truth. So suspend your judgments, don't come with assumptions, bring the open mind, and be willing to accept another culture. That's a really good life lesson, no matter what you're doing. But particularly in Latin class, it's just sort of a basic skill you need to have. And hopefully, if you do that, we can avoid seeing crazy things like dude wipes next time you go into the store, right? What is a dude wipe? Why is it gendered? I have no idea. These are bigger picture questions that you should probably think about. But again, it all comes back to gender. Understanding what it is really a key part of Latin class.